Hello and welcome back to the Motorsport Baithak podcast. I'm your host Didi, and joining me today once again is my friend and your co-host Vedant. On this episode, we'll be talking about the F1 Bahrain preseason test. So let's grab some chai, take our seats, ready our opinions, and dive right into the conversation. Hello Vedant, it's great to have you here, and I can't wait to talk about F1. But before we dive into it, I want to remind our listeners what a bumper weekend it's going to be next week for Motorsport. Not only do we have the F1 season opener, we also have the F2 and F3 season opener. We have WEC, IMSA, MotoGP, IndyCar, and NASCAR all next weekend, and probably more, which I don't remember. So I don't think I'll be leaving the TV. But you know what? Let's talk about F1. What are your impressions from this last test, Vedant?
Well, I'm positive, like I'm positively hopeful. First of all, of course, this whole week and next week is a bumper weekend for motorsports, and it's going to be very awesome, as you rightly said. But talking about last week and the Formula One test in Bahrain, the official test in Bahrain, it was. I mean, I wasn't able to follow it properly, so I was just checking on the live commentary periodically, and of course the day end podcasts and videos online. But I think the general consensus and my opinion as well is that the teams are positively ready for 2022, but surprisingly porpoising is still an issue.
Yeah, and we'll be probably hearing that
Yeah.
throughout the year. Not a big fan of the word, but you did say teams seem to be ready, but I'll have to disagree a little bit with what has happened with McLaren, Williams, and a couple other
Yeah.
teams
Well,
throughout the test. But like they say, you'd rather have the problems in testing than on
than on
race
race
day.
day.
So hopefully,
Yeah.
they'll come back in better fashion. However, I feel there were three teams that really made the headlines during testing this past week, and those teams were Haas, McLaren, and Mercedes. Now let's talk about Haas. Kevin Magnussen is back on the grid now. K-Mag, he has great relationships with the team at Haas and especially Gunther Steiner. But what is your impression? How do you feel about having K-Mag back on the grid? Obviously, he's been away for a year. He was racing in IMSA for Cadillac Chip Ganassi. For Cadillac Racing, I'm
For
not sure
yeah,
about Chip Ganassi,
for
but
Chip Ganassi Cadillac.
yeah, and then he also had an outing in IndyCar. He's had a few podiums there, but it's a return to F1.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Kevin Magnussen being back in Formula One, I think he himself said that after I made that decision and after I gave Gunther, after he gave Gunther his acceptance to be back in Formula One, he once again was thinking about it and reevaluating it. So definitely, it was not an easy decision. Now, of course, given the history of Haas, their current situation, and the competitive order of Formula One, Haas is not a desirable place to be in Formula One itself. And Kevin Magnussen with the in the DPI category in IMSA was always fighting for the wins all the time. Uh, so it was a difficult decision for him, definitely. But being back in Formula One is, in my opinion, a no-brainer. And when you know the team so well, and when the team has been investing in this new regulations throughout last season, they look very promising, and it's a new set of regulations, so you can make the best of them.
Yeah, it's definitely nice to have K-Mag. I wasn't ever a K-Mag fan when he was in F1,
Yeah,
so for me it was, it was a very neutral
yeah. I
addition or
mean,
re-addition to
he
the
was
grid.
just
Uh,
another racing driver as such.
Yeah, yeah, and but yeah, like you pointed out, Haas may not be the best place to be right now from a PR standpoint, but from a technical and competitive standpoint, Haas might just be springing a surprise on us. And looking at the times they have been posting in testing, we shouldn't be surprised if they are in the upper midfield or competitive within the midfield going into the season. Now, talking about the testing times and their run in the testing, obviously Haas had a freight issue. They didn't have their uh, you know they didn't have their components delivered on time, which is why they missed the first half day of day one of testing in Bahrain. However, they got to run, extra hours after each day. I think they got 1 hour each on Friday and
They
on
got
Thursday and
two
Friday, and
hours
then
each.
2 hours
Yeah.
on Saturday.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, and then a total of 4 hours over the 3 days of testing. But my question, Vedant, is why did the teams oppose the decision to let Haas run for an extra session on Sunday? Because it seems counterintuitive to me at first to let them run after the evening session on the 3 official testing days, because it seems that they would get better data, during the evening, especially regarding next weekend in Bahrain, where we'll be racing during that particular time.
Yeah, it's interesting, and so I haven't read entirely into it, but I think there was, like, apart from the teams opposing it, including McLaren, and I think it was Aston Martin or Alpine. But anyway, I think there was another issue, which was that testing should have been completed in 3 consecutive days as per the FIA regulations and the SOP, the documents, basically. So I think that was a second fold to it, a second degree to it, and that is why they got the extra hours on the allocated days. But as you rightly said, the data from the evenings in Bahrain was really representative of next weekend, and it gave them few glory runs because the temperatures were far less than the day.
Yep, and Haas needs all the glory runs they can get to get those sponsors lined up
Yeah, I mean,
for the rest of the season.
Kevin Magnussen went fastest right in his car as soon as he got in. So yeah.
And so did Mick Schumacher on the final day of testing. Yeah,
Yeah.
so and that really got people talking and excited about Haas, including me. So we'll see how they do. But I have to say I really like the new Haas livery without the blue. But I also wish, since it is just Haas at the moment, that they revert back to the gray, black, white, and red livery they used to have back in 2016, 2017. I really used to like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the OG Haas livery that Haas use in NASCAR as well is quintessentially Haas, right? So I think we want to see that back, but but
Absolutely.
like, from an economic kind of point of view, I think it's a great story for Haas that Gene Haas is now willing to invest in the team himself. So a lot of the fans, the general consensus among the fans was that Urul Kali was a majority investor, but as we now know, and as the journalists have pointed out several times, that they were a minor investor, and Gene Haas still retained major investment. And now that Gene Haas sees the potential and sees the level playing field from the financial regulations, I think it's great that Gene Haas is investing in the team once again.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I've said, don't be surprised if Haas do well. And I've said this ever since, last season. And there have been questions about, especially when Haas didn't get a lot of running during the first test in Barcelona, that they're still, at the back of the pack.
Yeah.
But I've said, there was a lot of talent transfer from Ferrari to Haas. And Simon Resta, I believe, is, heading technical development in Haas. And he's been in F1 for a long, long time. So do not, count out Haas as a contender, as a genuine contender in the 2022 season. Yes, operationally they haven't been the best over the past few years, and that is something that they need to work on. So they might be on a similar situation like AlphaTauri has been for the last couple of years, but they've had a great car, but they haven't been able to get the best out of it, from a performance and an operational standpoint. But anyway, enough about Haas. Let's talk about the second team that made a lot of different headlines during testing, McLaren. Now, obviously, Daniel Ricciardo did not take part in testing at Bahrain. He tested positive for COVID, and there's question marks on whether or not he'll be available for race one. Obviously, we hope that he recovers quickly and tests negative for COVID on Friday morning, so that he can partake in the practice sessions and in the race on next weekend.
Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely. It's I mean, it's the last thing that McLaren wanted, that one of their drivers for the season is not there for the testing, because I mean, while Lando Norris's feedback is there, but Daniel Ricciardo's feedback is his own, and it's obviously different from Lando Norris, and their programs were already set in place before they landed in Bahrain. So for Norris to take over Ricardo's programs was another difficult task for Norris. Like, I assume it would have been a difficult task to make that transition as well. So yeah, it's the last thing you want.
Yes, especially since it was, Daniel Ricciardo who needed more time in that McLaren, given that he struggled last year. So, it
Yeah.
was, he definitely needed more running than he got. But that is not where McLaren's struggles ended. McLaren was on the back foot as the car continued to face brake cooling issues on the front axle, severely limiting their run times. Obviously they tried a few things, but it seems that, they still need to find a proper solution for the first race in Bahrain in about 6 days' time.
Yeah, it was super disappointing because, like, while we could see McLaren making progress in Barcelona, and we could see all the teams making progress in Barcelona, McLaren, just because of the brake issue, fell behind their
Bahrain,
competitors
yeah.
in Bahrain. Yeah, just behind their competitors in Ferrari and the top two teams, Mercedes and Red Bull. So
Yes, like you pointed out, especially given the fact that in Barcelona they were probably the favorites alongside Ferrari having no porpoising issues and having a phenomenal 3 days in Barcelona. You wouldn't have expected them to have such struggles in Bahrain. But in other news, on the bright side, McLaren has other things that are going their way. Alpine obviously, had a deal with has struck a deal with McLaren that allows Oscar Piastri to be a reserve driver for them in the 2022 season, and I think that's great news for the 2021 F2 world champion. And obviously, Will Buxton was talking about this on the F1 YouTube channel, and I believe he pointed out something that might just be possible, that if the F2 world champion does not get a F1 seat the following year, they should be given a reserve driver role for all teams across the grid, so that they might have a chance to step into, not just, obviously, testing has become compulsory almost for junior drivers, for all teams, but this might give them half a chance to get into a Formula One car.
yeah, I mean, I think it is one of the best solutions for that particular problem of a Formula 2 champion not finding a seat in Formula 1. But I think the biggest drawback of that is the teams won't agree. Because let's take Oscar Piastri for example. We hope not, but if he races for McLaren in Bahrain, and so he knows some details about the McLaren, and then if Aston Martin or Mercedes require a reserve driver in that situation, Oscar Piastri goes to Mercedes or Aston Martin, and then the exchange of secrets, air quote secrets basically, can be there. So the teams might oppose to that, but the underlying concept of it is brilliant, and I think that should happen.
Definitely. And, there was another driver deal that happened this past weekend. McLaren signed a driver development deal with Colton Herta. Definitely exciting. I've always said Zach Brown has some big plans in motorsport, not just in F1. But it begs the question, obviously this will help the Andretti driver make progress towards obtaining a super license, especially with Andretti looking to get into F1 with their proposal that they made a couple months ago. But my question is, what is Zach Brown's grand plan here? Why is he helping Andretti? Or is it just a financial deal? Because, Zach Brown is expanding McLaren's operations across the motorsport industry. But what does this particular deal mean for McLaren?
I mean, Zach Brown has long lasting ties with Andretti from the past. So, if you remember, the first McLaren IndyCar project with Fernando Alonso back in 2017 was with Andretti, and Zach Brown's United Autosport also runs some deal with Andretti, if I'm
I
not
think, yeah,
wrong.
Walkinshaw, Andretti, International something, I
Yeah.
think, yeah.
So
Yeah.
so so Zach Brown has long lasting ties with Andretti. So it may be a result of those business relations as such, but then again, there's definitely a financial aspect to it. So yeah, I don't know what Zach Brown's thinking, but the way he has operated McLaren for over the last few years has been revolutionary and has been a proper motorsports organization. What a proper motorsports organization should be in Europe. We have those in US. We have the Andrettis, we have the Chip Ganassis and the Penske's, but we needed that in Europe and in the top flight. So we now have that. So it's exciting, to say the least.
Absolutely, absolutely. And then one last thing for McLaren was they're innovating with wheel guns. Apparently, there are optical sensors that tell, the mechanic when the wheel guns have been tightened. So clearly, McLaren are pushing boundaries everywhere, especially with the new rules and regulations that, prevented from, prevents some technology or innovations in the pit stop. I guess aspect of going racing in Formula One. So it's great to see McLaren, push it forward. I'm not sure if the other teams will adopt this or try to adopt this as quickly as possible, but hopefully, this does help McLaren with their strategy.
Yeah, obviously. I mean, as you said, pit stops are as crucial as anything else in Formula One. And with less pit stops expected this season, with the new tire degradation rates, basically, so the single pit stop is going to be more important than last year, in some ways. So yeah.
Absolutely. Yep, definitely, definitely. But enough about McLaren, Vedant. Let's, move our focus, I guess, to Mercedes. The only headline they made, I feel, this particular testing was their new no side pod design, I guess.
Yeah.
What do you think about it? Definitely, I think Cristiano Ronaldo came out and said that they are definitely legal. And it's obviously another extreme direction that Mercedes has taken compared to all other teams on the grid. But what were your impressions? To me, the car doesn't look exactly great, but that has nothing to do with performance. And if Mercedes have gone down that route, I'll be surprised if it. I'll be surprised if they are slower because of that,
Yeah.
or anything like that. I think if they've taken that decision, I'm sure there's a lot of merit behind it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as you said, the look of the car is not great. So I don't feel it is a Formula One car. We know Formula One cars with side pods. We know Formula One cars with air openings on the drivers either side. So it does not look like a Formula One car, and those crash structures sticking out make it feel weird, if I may use the word. But as you said, if Mercedes have taken that route, even though they are struggling right now with porpoising and with other things, with understeer and everything like that, if Mercedes has taken that route, it definitely has merit, because Mercedes has one of the best engineers in their team. So yeah, absolutely.
Yep, yep. And another thing to point out is, the fact that all of these concepts that the teams have gone for have a limit to how upgradable they are in a way, right? And we'll see as the season progresses as to how fast and how much these teams are able to exploit the potential of the design decisions they have made now, and that we can see on the track. So it'll be interesting to see how, the Mercedes design develops over the course of the season, the next 2-3 seasons even, and how much potential it has. But we'll see about it. Obviously, these were the three teams that made the major headlines during testing. But let's talk about the favorites for the season opener in Bahrain, Ferrari. Now, Vedant, I've said time and again, I'm hedging my bets against Ferrari. Ferrari, obviously, it's been very encouraging because they haven't had any issues, but we've seen similar testing stuff before, and then we've seen Ferrari, fall, not be as high up the order as we would expect. But what are your expectations from Ferrari going into the next weekend?
Well, I think first of all, right now the Ferrari driver lineup is one of the best in their recent years. Now, obviously, no disrespect to Seb or Kimi, but Kimi was in his latter years of the career, and Seb was in his prime. But the whole team dynamic was not perfect. Ferrari did have some internal political issues. There was a lot of personal changing. So whenever we saw potential with Ferrari in the car, there were some different aspects to it that were not working. Right now, the Ferrari is a new breed. The two drivers are in the prime of their careers. The the Ferrari revamp from after 2019 and 2020 is in its full swing. So no doubt Ferrari are the favorites. They had two trouble-free tests, 6 days of trouble-free testing, and everyone is calling them the favorites, but then again, you never know what happens in the first race of the season. So yeah, it's
Yep,
definitely
and
very
Lewis
exciting
and
for
yep,
Tip
and
4V.
Lewis and Russell, playing down Mercedes and saying that they won't be competing for wins at the start of the season is like telling me that Santa Claus is real, as people have pointed out on Twitter. So I'm not going to believe them one bit. But let's talk about the rest of the teams. Pretty anonymous, especially AlphaTauri. They had an incident-free test once again, but pretty quiet. Williams had a suspension failure and they were pretty embarrassed about it, but not a whole lot else coming out from the team. Again, Alpine finally had a decent test after their struggles in Barcelona with the engine and the car. So that's good news for El Plan. And finally, both Bottas and Zhou got a decent amount of time in the car, so that's good for Alfa Romeo. Aston Martin, again, they seem to be struggling. The general consensus says that the car is not where where the drivers want it to be. So it might not be all good news for Papa Stroll, like you said, and he might be a little bit furious going into the season. But it just seems like that the midfield from last year will be just as close going into the season this year. But it'll be the progression throughout the season that'll make the difference at the end.
Yeah, I think from what we have seen from the lower teams of last year, it's definitely a progress. There are no struggles. There's no like. So there were reliability issues in Barcelona, but I think the Bahrain test has been relatively issue free for all of the teams except for that Williams suspension failure. But I think in the end, the group will be more closed up. So when there's a new set of regulations like we saw in 2014, the group does wander off a bit. So the gaps between teams become larger, and then the convergence begins. But I think this time with these new regulations, the initial gaps might be smaller than in 2014 or 2009, for example. But it's going to be very exciting how these teams converge into that one single operating window, because if you see, all these teams have gone for a variety of different design philosophies, and I don't remember seeing such varied design philosophies in my 10, 11 years as a proper Formula One fan.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be exciting. And now one last thing, and obviously it is about the team that won the Drivers' Championship last year. Red Bull, Max Verstappen went out and posted a headline time in the closing stages of the final day of testing. But everybody's saying, don't read into that too much. Red Bull did show their hand, but that doesn't mean that the game is over. But what are your thoughts on that, Vedant?
Well, I think that was definitely a power play. That was definitely a glory run. Of course, Red Bull is fast. Of course, they'll be in the top five. Of course, Max Verstappen will be in the top five drivers throughout the season at almost every race, right? But I think that headline time was just to show their hand and just to, take a place of power and just assert their domination in
Just
a
the
way.
mind games.
Yeah, just a mind
Yep,
game.
just the
Absolutely.
mind games. But also very weird from Red Bull to introduce a major upgrade in the last couple of hours of testing instead of introducing it much earlier. But that's I feel that's very Red Bull. They've done that in the past, I believe, where they've brought up major upgrades towards the last few hours of testing. But we'll see how this pans out. Obviously, drawing up, at least in my opinion, drawing up any sort of pecking order is near impossible at this point of time. And we'll only know after the end of qualifying on Saturday that what the actual pecking order is for this season. But before we wrap up this podcast, Vedant, what are your expectations going into the first race of the season in about 6 days' time?
Well, it's very difficult to say what the expectations are. I think obviously the top four teams we know of Red Bull, Mercedes, Ferrari, and hopefully McLaren. But I think Alpha Tauri is going to be the dark horse this season. They were the dark horse last season. They were going to be they were supposed to be the third or fourth fastest team across all races, but they botched it up operationally and through driver errors. But I think right now, like Pierre Gasly, obviously we know is one of the best drivers in Formula One right now. So he just needs to make his starts better and choose his fights better. He struggled with that last season. And Yuki Tsunoda, I think, is a more mature driver, and he has learned from his mistakes from his recent interviews. So I think Alpha Tauri is going to be a very interesting prospect. We have seen that they are quick. We have not seen any issues from them. But yeah, I think Alpha Tauri would be that middle team which will differentiate between the lower and the upper rung of the ladder.
Yeah, that's I could see that happening. I could see that coming true. My only expectation going to this weekend, as much as I am, hedging my bets against it, hedging my expectations, I'm still, secretly hoping that everything about Ferrari that people are saying comes true, so that we have a reason to celebrate at the end of the first race weekend. But yeah, that's all from our side for this podcast. Thank you, Vedant, for joining me once again. It's been again, fun talking to you, and just can't wait to go racing once again in about 6 days' time. Thank you to our listeners for listening to us, and we'll catch you on the next one. Bye bye.